All right, all right. Let me know if you guys can hear me. Really excited to be here today. Let me know if you can hear me. Make sure the audio is working. I would hate to be talking to no one. So if someone in the comments can just be like, "Yes, Brent, I can hear you. Everything is loud and clear." Awesome. Audio is good. Thank you, Felix. Appreciate it. Hey, everybody, thanks for being here. I just wanted to, hey, just do a little Q&A session today. If I can help you with any jazz questions that you might have, I'm happy to answer them. So that's what I'm here for today. Pretty simple. Thanks for everybody joining me in the chat. Let me know where you're from. Let me know what instrument you play. That would be awesome to know as well. Seeing a lot of you from all over the world. We have our friend from Ukraine. I'm sorry I can't pronounce your name because I can't read the language. Duncan Wilson from Ontario. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Marcelo from Brazil. Thank you so much. Matt from Ontario. Ed from Chicago, Illinois. I love Chicago. It's a great city. Brett from Detroit-ish. All right. Matt H, thanks for being here. I've already said that. Levi, thanks for being here from Brazil. Rudy, thanks for being here. So many of you are coming in. So thank you so much. Again, if you have jazz questions, leave them down there. I'll get to them in a second. Just happy to answer and just serve you the best I can today with anything that's on your mind or just questions about anything, I suppose. So thanks for hanging out. So I am so excited today, guys. I am like just overwhelmingly excited. I just finished editing, like the production is done of a free blues masterclass I'm coming out with on October 6th called Boost Your Jazz Blues. I turned out so much better than I thought. So I'm just so excited about this. For those of you who've been following me on the podcast, we're doing Jazz Blues Month right now. And on October 6th, I'm launching my new Jazz Blues course called Jazz Blues Accelerator. But leading up to that, on the same day, I'm coming out with Booster Jazz Blues, which is completely free. I'm so excited about this course. It's so amazing. So I'm really excited about that. By the way, I left the link in the description, jazzbluesaccelerator.com, if you want to get signed up for when that masterclass comes out. In the meantime, yeah, we'll get those jazz questions coming in, guys. Andre from Italy, thanks for joining. I was just in Italy. I was in Rome for a day and a half. And then me and my wife went to the Amalfi Coast, hung out there, visited Pompeii. I mean, and the food was amazing. What a great country. So enjoyed being there. Edwin from Mexico, so glad to have you. Man, appreciate all you guys for being here. So while I'm waiting for the jazz questions to come in, so feel free to leave those in the comments. Just thought we'd start out by, I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about this Booster Jazz Blues course, and then I'll get to answering those questions. So oh man, I'm so excited about this. So there's three parts of the course, or the masterclass rather. I talk about the why jazz blues mastery will give you an unfair advantage, because if we can play the blues, like there's so many reasons I talk about in the masterclass, but if we can just completely crush it on the blues, like we can totally start playing hundreds of other jazz standards. And once we have those basic lessons down and we can improvise over those chord progressions, it just opens up everything else so much. Not to mention that, the blues is a huge part of, where the music started. New Orleans, European marching music, and African American blues music. I mean, this is when it comes together, right? And so it's so important to have the blues. And the second part of the masterclass is the what? Three simple strategies for building jazz blues improv tropes. And this is, I'm really excited about. I talk about several different things. I talk about mapping. If you're following me on the podcast recently, I've been going over that. I talk about the importance of learning blues heads and how to do it the right way. And I also talk about three pillars of jazz language that I think if you know this language, it just will completely rock your world to work on. So I talk about that. And then the final part of the masterclass is the what. It's my secret formula for jazz blues acceleration. And that's really what my superpower is. If any of you have been in any of my courses or anything, I'm like all about getting people to go from point A to point B. Like, because you could just go on YouTube, right? And watch a bunch of videos, and you can, listen to my podcast all you want and stuff like that. But if you're not actually having a process like that's going to really help you improve your jazz playing and like a practice program, I mean, nothing's going to really help. So I give that away too. So really excited about this course. this masterclass leading into my course, but the masterclass is totally free. So go to Jazz Blues Accelerator .com if you want to get signed up for that. Okay. Well, so we have 74 people watching. That's so awesome. Let me start looking for some jazz questions, and we'll get straight to it. So, starting with Matt H. Other than Coltrane, is there someone you can recommend a recording with a very effective but simple solo? Yes. 100%. I can recommend somebody. That would be Hank Mobley's solo. Well, pretty much any Hank Mobley solo. Hank Mobley solo on Someday My Prince Will Come, the Miles Davis album, and of course the name of the track, Someday My Prince Will Come. Hank Mobley takes a really great solo on that album. I think I learned it. I learned it years ago, the entire thing, by ear, of course, and that was really impactful solo. Just to hear how he develops ideas and just very simple stuff. Um, it's interesting that you lumped Coltrane with with simple. Well, maybe you didn't mean it's simple, but I mean Coltrane can play some simple solos. Another solo by Coltrane I learned that is actually fairly simple-ish is his solo on My Shining Hour, and I actually obsessed over that one. I learned the whole thing, and then I took the first chorus and I took it through all 12 keys. that's when that's when I wasn't married and I didn't like run a full-time online jazz education business and I had way more time on my hands. But anyways, that was so I would say go to Hank Mobley. And if anybody has any other suggestions, like leave them in the comments because there's obviously so many great I don't know if you're just looking for sax solos, but there's so many great solos out there that that you can learn that are simple and super melodic and beautiful that are accessible for everybody. And then Miles Davis, by the way, not saxophone, but Miles Davis. I always tell students to go to Miles Davis because, I mean, he just plays so melodic and simple, and you can learn so much just from some of his solos. Like Freddie Freeloader, great solo, all of that stuff. Let's see, going through here. Isama Joshua from Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining me, my friend. Appreciate that. Tigran, nice to have you in. Daniel from Northern Virginia, thanks for being here. Jesus from Spain. Kazar from Mongolia. You know, that's one thing I love about the Learn Jazz Standards community is like everybody's from all over the world, and like jazz is just like a music that brings people together. And that's so awesome. So honored to be like just a small part of that story. Um, Alexi from Finland, Marie from Denmark. Okay, we got a question from Duncan Wilson, and that question is, what blues solos would you recommend I transcribe? I've already done Wynton Kelly on Freddie Freeloader, and I'm looking for something more complex and beboppy with a 6 chord, so on. You play the keys. Okay. I don't know if I have like a very specific what piano one. That's a good one, the Wynton Kelly. So that was actually the first jazz solo I ever learned was Wynton Kelly solo on Freddie Freeloader. So that's a really good one. Um, but I would say that Wynton Kelly's is pretty beboppy on that one. That's pretty bluesy. I don't know if anybody has suggestions for Duncan, just like pile them down in the comments right now and just like load as many ideas as possible for blues solos. I know that um, you know, some of my favorite blues solos have come off of Tenor Madness with Sonny Stitt and John Coltrane. If you, sorry, not Sonny Stitt, Sonny Rollins and John Coltrane. If you haven't heard that album, first of all, amazing album. The only time that John Coltrane and Sonny Rollins ever played together is on that album, and Tenor Madness is the track. And that is beboppy and complex. If you want to just even take one chorus out of either Sonny Rollins or John Coltrane solo, that will show you how to absolutely tear up a blues. So it doesn't matter if you play keys or guitar like I do, or saxophone or trumpet. Like we can learn from all instruments, and that's really what I preach here and Learn Jazz Standards. So that's what I would say. You could check out that one. Of course, everybody leave some comments for Duncan because there's probably so many others. Tony from Kansas, thanks for hanging out today. Appreciate you. Katie from Illinois, euphonium and trombone, awesome. All right. Tony Rod asks, what are your tips for memorizing chord changes? What are your tips for memorizing chord changes? So, first of all, if you've been following me at all for any time, any people, you guys know that I like preach learning by ear, like 100% learning by ear. And Learning chord changes by ear is typically the harder one to do, right? It's easier to learn melodies by ear than it is chord changes. So, first of all, do it by ear. How do you do it by ear? I have a whole YouTube video up on hearing chord changes by ear. Do a little Google search for that one or a YouTube search for that one. You might be able to find that. Um, a lot of it is some ear training. A lot of it is just simply learning as many jazz standards as possible. And then you start recognizing chord changes. Like before you know it, you hear a 2-5-1 chord progression and you're like, that's a 2-5-1 chord progression. You hear a minor 2-5-1 and you hear what that sounds like. You hear what a 1-6-2-5. So it becomes easy to hear it. But if you really want to memorize them and not forget them, just do it by ear. Even if it takes you longer at first, that extra effort goes a long way. So if you're someone that might, think you learned a tune and you go up on a jam session or a gig and suddenly things fall apart because you sort of forget it. It could be a number of reasons, but I think one reason that always happens is people don't learn it by ear, and therefore things don't really stick up there, right? And then of course just repetition, right? If you want to memorize chord changes over and over again, just play the songs over and over and over again, and play them with other people. Don't just play them by yourself if you can. So find a jam session if you have one nearby you or a buddy. Oh, gotta get some water. Okay. Hope that helped a little bit, Tony. Uh, Felix Huber says, so I've checked out your recommendation on a practice routine, and I've worked out similar for yourself. It appears that it is a bit ambitious to manage a tune a week with limited time. Yes, you don't have. I don't necessarily think learning. You don't have to learn a tune a week. I think you should just do a tune a week is a lot. I mean, sometimes less is more. I'm not sure which practice routine you're referring to. Um, However, I mean that can be a great goal too, but just tweak it for yourself. Maybe you learn one tune every month, right? I mean, that's awesome. If you learn one tune every month and really dive deep into that tune, right? You learned the melody by ear, you learned the chord changes by ear, and you're practicing it in an effective way with a goal-oriented plan so that by the end of that month you feel solid about it. Like that is a good day's work. Maybe you even learned a chorus from a solo over top of that. That's a good day's work. So you don't have to do one new jazz standard a week. Like that's really ambitious. I actually did that between high school and college. I did a program with a teacher. I was having trouble paying to go to college right away for these music schools I wanted to go to. So I decided to stay back with the teacher, and I did that. I learned one tune no, I learned 3 tunes every single week for a year. But again, those were crazier times where like I had nothing else going on in my life except for playing gigs and practicing and teaching guitar lessons. So you don't have to do that much. I mean, sometimes just keep it simple. Keep your practice routine simple. Um, just take a little bit of information and just recycle it. That in my new jazz blues course, Jazz Blues Accelerator, coming out on October 6th, that's it. That is exactly what we do. We just take some information and we just crunch it, like just work it. And I mean, that's the kind of stuff you need to do. So that's what I hope that helped Felix, just to hopefully make you feel better. You don't have to do one tune a week. You can go easier on yourself. It's supposed to be fun anyways, right? Matt H plays trumpet and flugelhorn. That is so awesome. Felix, another question. Anything besides learning stuff by ear to train the ears, maybe during the day? Yes, you can always do interval ear training, right? You can always do interval ear training. So, you can sing a pitch like um duh, and then be like sing a major 6 above that, duh, duh, that's a major 6, right? You can do stuff like you hear even just a sound like on the street, right? You hear like the sound, like I live in New York City, so the subway doors closing and they go dee doo, right? And so that's a major third, by the way, dee doo, that's the doors closing. So you can do all kinds of things around your natural environment. You can do things like singing triads, right? Da da da, right? Major, da da da, right? Minor. You can start singing extensions on top of that, like sing the root, then sing the ninth. Like you can do all sorts of little things like that that obviously aren't like applied ear training, like as in learning solos by ear and stuff like that. But that's really gonna help you, that you can do just like little things that just help train your ear and build your ear up. That's in my experience, anyways. Okay, let's see. Um, Jesus asks, how is the best way to start improvising? Okay, the best way to start improvising is, first of all, don't freak out. And just learn a tune. Okay. So maybe learn a simple tune. Oh, learn a blues, right? And then learn the head of a blues. I wish I had my guitar hooked up. I don't know how to make. I need to work on that. I need to figure out a setup so I can actually play stuff on whenever I go live. I don't go live very often, so I apologize for that today. But okay, for example, the first lick I ever learned was a blues lick. Okay, and it was do 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 dee da do 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 dee da, right, and that was a lick. A teacher taught me that. I was sitting in a master class with his teacher, and then we had a private lesson afterwards. And he was like, "Hey, Brent, try playing this." Do-do-do-dee-da. And I was like, "Whoa, that's awesome!" Like, I mean, I didn't even know because like the time I had like very limited knowledge. I just learned know like minor pentatonic, right? And a lot of people do that, like Jesus, they go to scales right away, and I don't want you to go to scales right away. So what I learned later though was that lick. That's basically just the jazz blues head, "Sandu" by Clifford Brown. Do-do-da-dee-da, boo-do-dee-da. Dee-da-da-da-da, right? Have you ever guys heard that song? And right there, that's already ideas to start improvising with. Do-do-do-dee-da. Then like take that up a whole step, bro. Take that to the four chord. Do-do-do-dee, well, I can't hear it now. Do-do-do-dee-da, do-do-do-dee-da. Right. You can take it up a half step. You can start figuring out different ways to do it. I wish I had my guitar. I could show you some stuff. But just try improvising with just the melody and then see where you can go from there. When we get into like chord scale theory for improvising, all of that stuff is good. It's not bad, but use it with caution. Like, for example, a lot of people say, oh, the blues scale, play the blues scale over a blues. There's nothing wrong with that. That makes total sense because really, I don't believe in the blues scale. The minor pentatonic is really what the scale is. You're just adding a sharp four in there. But it's a good way to conceptualize it. So that stuff's good too, but start with the melody. So that's where I would say that's the first place to start is start with the melody, and then you can just go ahead and build up from there. Okay, so Sal says, I really want to learn how to write my own music. You have to help me, Brent. This is my experience. I'm not like a prolific composer or anything, but in my opinion, the only way to really start writing music is just to start doing it. Um, I think I played one of my original compositions on a recent LJS podcast episode. Where it's a if you go to my podcast on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, I think the episode is called um uh I can't remember what it's called right now. A good jazz solo and a bad jazz solo. I give an example of a good jazz solo and a bad jazz solo. My bad jazz solo was on my original composition, but that I actually really like that original composition. And many of you have reached out and said, "Hey, Brent, that was a great composition," and so thank you very much. Appreciate that. But really, it just came from me just writing a bunch of tunes and writing a bunch of crappy ones. So you just have to know some basic chord progressions and theory, right? And then you can just go for like start with a melody, like I just usually start with a melody and then I go, well, what kind of chords will sound good underneath that? So just try something like, right. Maybe make a goal for the end of this week. Like I want to write a song, right? Doesn't have to be like the best song ever. Just try it. Just try writing a song. You can do it. I believe in you, Sal. Um, okay, Brett. Oops, I lost my comments just jumped up. Let me see if I can find you back, Brett. Okay, Brett says, I'm meeting with a couple guys to play jazz for my first time tomorrow. I play guitar. Turns out I didn't have enough time to learn many tunes, very few actually. Do you think it's better to have a general idea of as many tunes as you can, or should I really try to focus on one or two, assuming I have the time? So, Brett, I would say just focus on one or two. There's no reason to try to learn a bunch of songs really fast, right? Because how well are you going to really know how to play those? It's okay if you don't. I mean, I'm sure the guys are cool. I mean, it's okay if you don't know that many tunes. Just play from where you're at. That's something that a mentor told me once. Just play from where you're at and do the best with what you have. So yeah, just focus on a few. Don't do too many. Right. Um, okay. Rudy Vasquez. I play sax, but learning piano and guitar. I burnt myself out on voicings all the time. Currently burnt out right now. Do you have any tips or recommendations for working on voicings for piano? I'm not a piano player, Rudy, so I really couldn't lead you to a good direction with that. Um, let's see. Kazar asks, "What's the best way to learn and play bebop? What are the best exercises for bebop?" That's a good question. So always, and no one ever likes this answer because it's not the easy answer, but the best answer is to learn some bebop. So try to learn Charlie Parker's solo on "Now's the Time." I mean, slow it down to get a slow downer like Amazing Slow Downer or Transcribe and slow it down for yourself. But just learn it, and then you'll kind of get the idea of it, right? And of course, listen to it, and you'll start to get the idea of it. But then there's some, of course, tricks you can do. So kind of the main components in my mind of what makes bebop is, well, actually there's three things. So number one is just chromaticism in general, right? So there's a lot of chromaticism. So you could play a jazz solo that's just based on the chord tones, or even just on modal playing. I mean, you could totally create a great jazz solo that outlines the chord changes, all that stuff. But then bebop, there's a lot of chromaticism in it, and chromaticism shows up in multiple different ways. So for example, um, you might use something like enclosure. So enclosure, I have a video on YouTube about that too. So just look for enclosure. And I explain enclosure more, but it's basically where you approach a target note. So let's say you're approaching the third of a chord that's coming up, and the third is a great note to target because it really makes the chord changes come out in your solos. The third is really strong. So is the seventh. We call them the guide tones. But let's say your target note is the third. If you're approaching it from above or below, either chromatically or diatonically. So you hit a note, and again, if I had my guitar, if I had it set up so I could show you guys, I would show you enclosure right now because it's really simple, but it's powerful. So that's a one way to conceptualize um, bebop harmony and bebop language is, you hit a note from diatonic above or below, and you connect them together. So they call it enclosing because you're enclosing on the target note. Um, yeah, without showing you an example, it's kind of hard. I have to figure that out for next time. Um, so that's a good exercise to work on. Also, just go to learnjazzstandards.com and type in enclosures. I'm sure we have some exercises on enclosures. So go there and check that out for sure. That'll be helpful for you. Because our let's see. Anna Ruth from Berlin. Nice to have you in here. Let's see. Bill from Australia, thanks for being here. Matt H says, "Thank you. You're right about Coltrane. I can hear the space between his notes. I love when you can drive a truck through the space between." Yes. Yeah, Coltrane is so awesome. Learn that My Shining Hour solo, man. It's such a great one. Um, someone asked earlier about piano solos on a blues. So Bill B says for piano, Night Train by Oscar Peterson. Although isn't that like that might be a tough one to learn, but hey, if you it's great. Um Monin, Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. Yeah, that's good minor bluesy kind of tune. Um Okay, Chris Merrills. When improvising over the blues, I have trouble creating a singular sounding solo. In other words, I tend to make each chorus sound like separate solos. Do you have any tips for playing more fluidly? I tend to make each chorus sound like separate solos. Yeah, I do have some tips for that, Chris. So whenever whenever you're building a solo, something to think about and practice is theme and variation or call and response. Both of those work together great. So you might play a musical idea, and let's say that Sandu lick I taught you earlier by voice, ba-do-da-dee-da, right? So you start with a lick like that, and then what can you do next to develop that idea? So ba-do-da-dee-da, da 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 do dee da da, right? And then we go to the four chord, ba-do-da-dee-da, da-da, right? And then you can develop that same idea. So if you're always just developing ideas and taking one little thing and going to the next idea and tweaking it a little bit and then going to maybe a different idea, but then you're just developing that idea. I mean, you're going to continue creating a solo that has direction and movement, and it's easier said than done. I definitely don't always do the best job, but um, yeah, that way maybe especially if you're playing regurgitated licks, that's something to try to avoid. It's great to learn licks and then learn them in all 12 keys and stuff. I'm not sure if this is an issue for you, but um, what that can do though sometimes is it make it sound like you're just playing a bunch of licks one after another, right? And so maybe that's where some of that separation starts to happen. It doesn't sound cohesive. So just take some time practicing this way, Chris, this week, and just take one musical idea over or chord progression and see how many times you can change it. And right, maybe you take an idea, then transpose it for the next one. Then the next chord, see if you can just do a few tweaks in there. Yeah, absolutely. Anna Ruth says, yes, agree on the relevance of Night Train, Oscar Peterson, and Trio. Yes, totally relevant. Bill, hello from Boston. You play guitar. I love Boston. Great city. My brother lives there. Um, Rafa says, hey, Brent, I am from Germany. I play the alto sax. I love your vids. I have an idea. You can make a video about different styles in jazz and what are the differences, for example, funk or fusion jazz. Well, thank you, Rafa, for the idea. I'll keep that in mind. Yeah, that would be an interesting video. I could see Adam Neely doing a good video on that, but I could do one too. You know. Um, Thanks for the suggestion. Devin Selena says, Chris Merrill's try and focus on playing a few notes, then taking a break. Play a few notes and take a break. Breaks allow the listener to take in what you have just played. That's another great tip. Thanks for sharing that, Devin. That's definitely another really great tip for developing great solos. Adam Scott says, bassist here, what's the biggest difference between soloing in guitar and soloing on bass? Well, I'm not a bass player. So I'm sure there's just technical differences, right? I mean, so they're both string instruments, but in general, in all of my teaching materials on Learn Jazz Standards, they're not like for one instrument. Like, I'm a guitar player, but they're not because the style of jazz, right, is I mean, it's just language, right? It's just like it's basically speaking a language. That's all it really is. So it's about learning the language. So everything in between with the different instruments, it's about learning the technique of your instrument. Like if you can get your technique of your instrument down and map out your instrument so that you understand it, that opens you up for the best possible scenario for learning the language and for improvising, right? Does that make sense? So I'm sure that it's just little technical differences. It's not, it's going to feel different to move somewhere. It's going to, maybe if you're playing, like, for example, like an electric bass, you're still playing like this. If you're playing an upright bass, that's a whole different technique. So it's going to feel different to improvise, and you might have to rely on different techniques than others. Like, for example, a piano player can, really take like, place things in the left hand and the right hand, and just go, can do a lot of different things that a guitar player can't do. Like I can sort of do it because I have a chordal instrument too, but you can use different things on your instrument to your advantage, right? So, um, so you just use that's what I would say is the only difference. Um, Rafa asks how to improvise in different styles. That's a simple answer to that question. It's like I just said, it's a language. So just listen to that music a lot, whatever style you're trying to learn, and then learn some repertoire, and then learn some. If it's improvisation, then learn the language. Like learn some solos, learn some licks, learn some etudes. Etudes is a really big thing that we are working on in my Jazz Blues Accelerator course coming out on October 6th, and I talk about that in the Boost Your Jazz Blues Masterclass, by the way. So if you make sure you sign up for that, jazzbluesaccelerator.com. That's a free masterclass. I talked about that at the beginning for those who have joining a little bit late. That sax guy, do you recommend creating your own blues etudes or the form to get the language down? Yes, 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 I do. Yes, I very much so do. This is another actually important part to my course. Um, it's learning. So you learn some language, you learn some information, you recycle it, you have a process, you have a direction, a goal, and you have a strategy, right? And then at the end of that strategy, you should try to compose your own idea. And the great thing about composing, so you've probably heard it said before, that improvising is just composing sped up. And I think vice versa as well, right? I mean, it really is if you think about it. So if we want to become good improvisers, wouldn't it be a great idea to practice composing like some solos? Yes. Like, and every time, the great thing about like being an educator and writing lots of music books and making lots of courses and of course free content like on YouTube and my podcast and stuff is I get to like compose a lot of materials. So I get to learn a lot for myself of like, what do I know about jazz language, right? And what do I know about blues language, right? And then I compose an idea, and maybe, like I listened to a solo that I composed like 6 or 7 years ago. And I didn't really like it very much, right? But I remember at the time when I wrote that solo, it was like awesome. I was like, wow, this is like a great solo. I would love to take this solo, right? Um, so you just document where you're at. So yeah, yes, I would definitely recommend writing your own blues etudes. So you learn the language and then you go out there and see what you learned. That's a great question. Thanks for asking that. Devin says also sing everything you play. It really helps your ear development. Agreed with that. Maybe some of you know my list process for learning jazz standards. It's also you could use it for learning anything really by ear. And list is an acronym, stands for listen, internalize, sing, and transfer. So say I want to learn a jazz solo or a chorus of a jazz blues. So first I'm listening to that over and over again, like just constantly, right? Because you have to be super familiar with it. And then the second step is to internalize. So internalizing is just you're just hyper focused on that recording, right? And it's really the result of just listening over and over again, so that it's all the way up here, like the neurons have connected. And then you sing. And the singing, basically, all singing really is, and why people always say to do that, or you can hum or whistle, is all it's doing is proving that you've internalized that information. If you can sing it, right, you might not be able to articulate every single note technically, but if you can sing it, that means that you know it up here. And the last step is transfer. So transferring is you just taking what you already know and putting on your instrument. So imagine if you learned Night Train's Oscar Peterson solo, although that might be a bad example because if I remember correctly, that's a tough solo. But if you can actually sing that and hear that up here, then you've already done like 75% of the work, right? Because at this point, now you're just going to your instrument and double checking to make sure you got the perfect right notes, right? You're listening to the recording, but you already know it, right? So yes, Devin, singing very important. That's my list process, by the way. Um, all right, Steph says hi, Steph from I'm Steph from San Francisco. Wondering if you can discuss demonstrate triad pairs on say rhythm changes. Again, I apologize. I did not. This is kind of spontaneous. I did not set up or figure out how. I don't really go live often enough to know how to set up my guitar. Else I would. There's been multiple times already I would have showed examples. So I apologize for that, Steph. I'll be better prepared next time. Um, Gets Mad says that's a clever name. Gets Mad, as in Stan Getz. For great blues singing and solos, check out Fine and Mellow Billie Holiday video. Lester Young is a masterclass in simplicity. Yes, yes. Um, Also, Billie Holiday is the best. So, but Lester Young solo is just oh man, it's amazing. Thanks for that suggestion. Um, Bill McKay says, "What does alt mean next to a chord name in a lead sheet?" So usually when you see alt, like let's say it says G7 alt, that basically is saying you can translate it a few different ways. I think most technically in a theoretical sense is it means like it has all the extensions and alterations in them. So like sharp 11, flat 13, sharp 9, flat 9, right? Or what you can just do, because that's kind of ridiculous and you don't necessarily want to play all of those necessarily. It depends on like, on a guitar, it wouldn't be practical for me to do that. And musically, sometimes it's not practical to do that. So what you can kind of do when I see alt is I kind of pick and choose. So my default go-tos are the flat 13 and like or the sharp 9, or you could just do a flat 9, right? Or a combination of some of those. So if you see alt, that's all it means, and it's pretty much always over a dominant seventh chord, and it's great for adding more tension and release. So the 5-to-1 relationship, that's tension and release, and it's the most important chord progression in all of Western music, right? So all that really does is add more tension. So that's what alt means. Hope that helped, Bill. Um, that sax guy asks again, what are 2 or 3 things you felt made you leap ahead in your playing? Hmm, that's a good question. At the end of the day, for me, every single time, it's about when I set up a process for myself. So a big common mistake. I know it's funny because like many of you listen to my podcast or follow me on YouTube, and I create lots of content, and that's really great. But I think the problem that we have is we just learn a bunch of random stuff, right? And learning a bunch of random stuff isn't helpful. That's why I love courses, because courses give you an actual process. Um, And so for me, a big thing that helped me, I kind of alluded to it earlier in this chat, was during between high school and college. I mentioned I took a year off and I just practiced ridiculous hours. Okay. But the thing is, I had a very specific program of what I would do. So I had a method to the madness. My goal was to learn X amount of, I won't even tell you how many because you guys might get discouraged. I don't want you, because like you don't need to learn that many jazz. I'll just tell you, I was supposed to learn 100 jazz standards by the end of the year. I wouldn't suggest that for anybody, by the way. It's really not the best way to do things. But that was my goal, and I had a very specific process of how I would do that. And like I said, I just mentioned my list process, right? That's a very specific process. And having a process and knowing how to take just a little bit of material and recycle it over and over again, doing that really helped me so that it wasn't just like ADHD of playing music, right? Just like, oh, here's this, and then look, here's this, and look, here's this, and that's not going to help you. So for me, I would say that's number one. Number two would be just putting myself in, have you ever heard the term proximity is power? There's some truth in that. And for me, when I moved to New York City about a decade ago, that was, I was automatically in front of just a lot of great musicians who were 10 times better than me, and still are, am around musicians that are just 100 times better than me, right? And being around those musicians and getting to play with them. I remember when I got to play a gig with a singer, and Roy Hargrove, rest in peace, his bass player that he played with, Amin Salim. And Amin Salim is so good that, I mean, I was so nervous, man. And I learned so many things. And I even just making mistakes on that gig, I learned so many things, right? And I know that not everybody has the opportunity to have a lot of great musicians to be around the same area. But I would just say find other like-minded musicians that will challenge you, right? That's something that I've learned not only just in music, but in life as well, has been helpful. Like find other people with like-minded goals and like go for that, because then you're just gonna like build each other up, right? Um, Hope that helped. Let's see. Yeah, Duncan said I just jumped up again in the comments. So I lost my place. Uh for Chris says for ear training, there are also free apps available for mobile. Yeah, there's a lot of free apps for sure that you can work with. I do have an ear training course too, but if you just want to work with a free app, that's cool too. Um, let's see. Tony Rod, in my jazz improvisation class, we learn a bunch of licks, but they are all in 4/4. What's an easy way to make some of these fit over a waltz? Okay, so Tony, like kind of, I don't want to say like an issue I have with your, like, it's not a negative way at all, but kind of the issue, making a lick fit anywhere is kind of the problem. And you do have to start there. Like you have to learn 2-5-1 licks, right? Like, so when I think about jazz language, I think about macro, which is like learning whole jazz solos or like a chorus or two choruses. When I think of micro jazz language, I'm talking about licks, like over a chord progression, like a 2-5-1. And right, 2-5-1 super popular. If you know a billion licks over that, like you know a lot of jazz language. But the problem with trying to make a lick even fit in another 4/4 song is that it's going to sound contrived. Sometimes it's going to come out natural, if you can make it sound that way. But oftentimes it's going to sound it's going to sound contrived. So it's not wrong, but I think a better way to think about licks is to consider them like language. And then from there, start creating your own ideas off of that. For example, if it's an altered lick that outlines an altered dominant resolving to the one, then you can take that same concept, those note choices and those things and apply it over a waltz, right? All you should simply do is just compose a bunch of different ideas. So be like, hey, that was a cool concept. Now I'm working on Up Jump Spring or Someday My Prince Will Come, which is in 3/4. So what are some different ways that I can start working that stuff out? I have a great video, by the way. I did a podcast episode on it, but I have a great video. I think it's called Killer Jazz Blues Improv Exercise or something. I actually take Someday My Prince Will Come and apply what's called uh, rhythmic, now I'm forgetting what I'm saying. Motivic development. Thank you. Got it in my head. Rhythmic motivic development. That's a really cool way to start playing over 3/4 is starting with rhythms, like composed rhythms, and then compose melodies. And you can compose your melodies after that. I do an example where I have one etude that's just rhythms over Someday My Prince Will Come. And then I actually add notes to those rhythms. And that's a good way to do it. And you can take that 4/4 lick you learned and be like, oh yeah, I'll do that concept where I landed on the flat 9 of the dominant 6 chord that goes to the 2 chord, right? Whatever it is, right? So that's how I would suggest to Tony. That's a few tips for that. Marie Cruz Jensen, do you know an effective way to improve my swinging? So, Marie, if you mean your swing feel, the best way you can do that is simply by learning lots of people, like learning solos by ear and then playing back with the recordings. Again, that's hard work, but the hard work pays off because then you get inside that swing feel or that time feel that musician has. And different musicians play differently. Like some play way on the back of the beat, some play straight in the middle, some people rush a little bit. Um, so you can get to know different swing feels. Like some people swing hard, some people, you know, barely swing, right? So just find a musician you like and just copy their lines. So you kill two with birds, one stone. You'll get their swing feel down, or even their straight eighth like vibe down, and you'll get the language. So it's a win-win situation. Um, Kevin Thompson, is there a set vocabulary for scat singing? I don't know, actually, Kevin. I'm not a singer, so I wish I could answer that for you. That's a good question, though. I really I don't know the answer to that. Um, Jose from Spain. You're in my 30 Steps to Bitter Jazz playing course. Cannot seem to work with SoundCloud. Okay, yeah, Jose, just reach out to me. Reach out to me on email. Okay, I can help you better there. I think we have been in email conversation. Um, so reach out to me there. This would be the best place to do it right now. But thanks for being in the course. I really appreciate it. Hope you're getting a lot out of it so far. Rudy Vasquez says, "Learn Green Onion's keyboard solo. It's a blues solo." Okay, sounds like a good advice. Is there a particular musician, or is that just the blues head? Um, um, Raphael says, "Hey, I'm Raphael from Portugal." Hey, Raphael, love your channel and been following your content for a while. Thanks so much. I really appreciate that. Hope I've been of any help. It's an honor. Thank you. Gets mad. Love that name. Talking about Sandu. Notice how major pentatonic is used ascending and blues scale descending. Yes, good observation. That's where theory comes in helpful, right? It's like you learn things by ear, but then actually understanding what's going on is also great too. Um, Tune efficiency. What's your approach when improvising over Nema in terms of scales? I don't think I could do a full on scales analysis of that tune for you right now, especially without my instrument or maybe a screen sharing situation. So I'll we'll table that one for now. Sorry, Raphael. Um, wow, we really need to kick this person out of the group. Bummer. Okay, looking for some more questions. Guys, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate all of you. Um, again, I was mentioning earlier, I have a free masterclass coming out on October 6th called Sunday, October 6th, called Booster Jazz Blues. I just finished putting it all together today, and I'm really excited about it because it turned out way better than I thought. And not that I didn't think it was going to go well, but it turned out really great. And I spent like I think literally like almost 10 hours planning and recording and making the slides and the material. I think it's going to be really helpful for you. It also is how to get an invitation into my Jazz Blues Accelerator course, which is also launching October 6th. So you don't have to take the course at the end, of course, just to take the free masterclass. But either way, if you want to sign up for that, just go to jazzbluesaccelerator.com. So jazzbluesaccelerator.com. I think also left the link in the description. So check that out. Really getting excited for this course that me and the team have been working really hard on it. And this masterclass, I was just like, yes, just turned out awesome. Um, TLG Productions. Hey, what's your opinion of the band Soft Machine? I don't know. I don't know that band. I'm sorry. I'll look them up. Let me write that down. Soft Machine. Interesting. I'm always up for other kinds of music. Mike Goodman asks, "Do chicks dig jazz musicians?" I don't know. Some of the ladies probably could answer that better. um, I don't know. My wife likes jazz, so maybe they do. Um, uh, Barney asks, "Hey, hi, I'm Barney from Los Angeles. I've only really ever studied classical saxophone. How do I adopt stylistic things in jazz? I've had a hard time letting go of vibrato and playing too pretty." So, Barney, like again, I've answered this question for some other people. Someone asked that question about swing feel just a second ago. Um, I can't speak to being a classical musician because I've never been a classical musician. I've only gone as far as like played through different pieces for technique and stuff. But what I can say is for me, anytime I want to learn the feel or the language, I go straight to the recordings. And so just start with a simple blues solo. Like, I'm not sure what instrument you play. Did you say that? But, start with, saxophone. So, you know what a good one would be? Just go to, Miles Davis's solo on Freddie Freeloader and like just learn that solo or just parts of that solo and just literally play it along with recording. So you're playing exactly like that, right? And then record yourself and see what that sounded like. Then start recording yourself just improvising over different standards, right? So you learn the feel from somebody, right? You learn and you can choose someone else like a saxophone player if you want, like more bebop or whatever you're into, right? But you really try to get inside that person's playing so you can get the style and the feel and even the language. Then record yourself improvising and then just mark and just notice every time you did the vibrato, right? Just every time. I know I do that to myself too, where I'm like, there you go again. You started rushing, right? I will listen back to recording like, Brent, you tend to rush. You just rushed, right? So that's what I would suggest, Barney. Hope that helps. Um, Jens Larson is in the house. Thanks for being in here, Jens. Appreciate that. Um, Jens is the man, by the way. I'm sure all of you, especially the guitar players, follow his channel on YouTube. We did an episode recently on my podcast a little while ago. I can't remember off the top of my head what episode number it was, but it was an awesome episode. So I would definitely looking up for you right now, actually. Episode 178, becoming your own jazz teacher by recording yourself. That's right. We talked about recording yourself. So if you want to go, Barney, if you want to go even further with what we just talked about, listen to that episode um, with Jens Larson. That's a great one to check out. Um, my comments are jumping up. Joshua Sanchez, how do you play good ideas while soloing? um, I don't know. How do you play good ideas? So I think again, like all the stuff I've been talking about, like learn the language, compose your own etudes, compose your own solos, um, and then they just start coming, right? So it's not easy, right, to improvise. But if you're learning the language, if you're starting to compose your own ideas, so you can practice composing, so that you know you can speed it up later and improvise, right? That's how I would say you should do that. As a blues guitarist, what's the best place to start getting into jazz playing? The blues. The blues is. So Ruben, yeah, what I would suggest is attend my free masterclass coming up on October 6th, and sign up for that. Because basically in that masterclass, I also sort of define what makes a jazz blues, not just harmonically speaking, but the language that's involved in it too, traditionally. I think that would be a really great place for you to see like um, kind of like some stepping stones to like what's the difference and how can I get more into that. And then the blues I talk about in my course, but also this my master class. I really talk a lot about how if we know a jazz blues really well, it automatically is going to open us up into just being able to play like hundreds and hundreds of other jazz standards. And you can keep learning lessons along the way, but the blues is like a really good starting place. So that's what I would say, especially because you're a blues player. Joshua Sanchez also asks, what are good ways to practice making your improvisation speak to the listener? I don't know how much you can practice that. I just think that once you become competent enough and literate enough with playing, and then you just start playing, then you're able to express the ideas you want to play better. I know that there's also been gigs for me where for some reason I wasn't feeling it. Maybe it was something going on in like in my other life or the rest of my life, or maybe just the band wasn't driving together very well. And like, yeah, it didn't feel like I was able to play what I wanted to play. But there's also been gigs where like I transcended the levels of what I thought I could play and the ideas I was playing, where like it was just an emotional experience. And I think when you're feeling that emotional experience and you're able to translate those ideas and just play in the moment and not think too hard, which is hard to do, then that's when that happens. So I don't know if you can practice it other than just keep practicing everything else. Keep losing my spot in the chat. I don't want to miss anybody's questions. Feel free to keep leaving them, guys. I'll be here for a little longer. Um, I think we've been here for 50 minutes. Wow, time flies when you're having fun. Um, Luke Swinkles, hi everyone. I'm just a classical composer who wants to know more about jazz stuff. That's awesome. Yeah, this is the right place, I think. Dan Sitch, hey Dan, nice to see you. Dan was he actually completed my 30 Steps to Better Jazz Playing course. I had Dan on the podcast at some point last year. Hi Brent, how would you go about introducing a young child to improvising? Yeah, I I don't teach. I used to teach a lot of kids. I wouldn't say that teaching kids are my forte. That's why like pretty much all of you are adults. um, but I would just say I was talking to a friend who does teach a lot of kids. He's a piano player, and literally he'll just have them, create little ideas. That's all. Like, for example, maybe they learn a major scale, and he'll just be like, "Hey, why don't you create a different why don't you create a melody out of that, like show me something that you can do with that." Or like he'll teach them a concept, right? And then he'll ask them to be creative. So because like I was kind of talking about before, even with like being able to play jazz or even in more intense music, right, that's hard for anybody to play, is the composing. Like start with some composing, right? If you can compose some ideas, then it's way more likely that you're going to internalize those and be able to improvise them. We're taking improvisation and slowing it down, making it composing. So I would just say, just maybe a lot, like teach them something and then allow them to create something with it. Hope that helps, Dan. Ralph Bergman asks, are chord tones a good way to start soloing for newbies? Chord tones are a massively important way to start soloing. If you're new or if you're experienced, listen to some Thelonious Monk stuff. And uh, what's the saxophone player who plays with Thelonious Monk? I mean, he played with multiple. There's like one specific saxophone player I'm thinking of. But his name is eluding me right now. Those guys play a lot of chord tones. Check it out, and extensions and alterations too, because it's Monk. But you could literally play a great jazz solo just with chord tones. And so one thing I talk about in this masterclass that's coming up, and I've also talked about my podcast last week, I talk about mapping. And one of the first steps for mapping is chord tones and connecting chord tones with voice leading. So if we have a jazz blues, we take the whole form and we play up a C arpeggio, then we play down the four chord. I was thinking in the key of C. So the one dominant seventh chord, then the four chord, and you connect them with voice leading. So you're not necessarily starting and ending on the root, but you're able to connect all of them together. If you can do that, you're going to start playing chord changes, and it's that easy, right? But it's not that hard really when it comes down to it. If you know the formula for all of your chords, and then you start just slowly working through connecting them together with voice leading, the nearest tone, uh, some magic can start to happen. So yes, start with chord tones, and you're going to start creating some great solos right away. Um, Micah Finister, hi all. I play alto sax and want to know soloing over one chord. Okay, well, I mean that's where chord scale theory can come in to play. Like for example, if you're trying to learn how to solo over just one chord, like a major 7 sharp 11 chord, then try out to the Lydian, right? If you're trying to play sharp 11, just dominant 7 sharp 11, then Lydian dominant, right? That might be a good idea. If you're trying to play over an altered chord, try the altered playing the altered scale. That's where some chord scale theory can help. But of course, those scales are not enough. You don't want to play up scales or down scales. That's not music. So just treat them as what I call pitch collections. They're just note choices you have to conceptualize an idea and start creating melodies. Same as just talking about Dan about. Just take a concept, an idea, and then just figure out as many different ways to create. So composing is a big theme today, and it really is. So That's what I would suggest doing for one chord. Yeah, Luke says, "Hey, Micah, do you know all the modes and stuff?" Yeah, knowing some theory when we're talking about one chord improv is helpful a little bit. Brett Demarco asks, "Oh, just lost my. Sorry, guys, my comments keep jumping on me. There it is, Brett. Hey, Brent, are there rules of thumb or guidelines for comping on guitar? I'm sure the first thing to do is listen to the greats, not only a guitar but a piano too. So I would say, are there rule of thumb guidelines? I don't know if there's really guidelines other than don't play too much. Like seriously, like guitar players tend to overplay and overcomp. So whenever you're comping, I don't even think it's. I think on the guitar, it's about just learning your instrument and being able to play. Like you know what I would do? I would go to Jens Larsson's channel. Jens is in the discussion right now. Go to Jens Larsson's channel. He has a million different things for guitar players to like start learning the fretboard. I also do have like a really old blog post on. Well, actually, I have a book you can check out. Called what is that book called? I wrote the book. One second. It's called Visual. It's a little too bright. Visual improvisation for jazz guitar. And I wrote this for Hal Leonard a while back, and that book is just really my method for just learning the fretboard. So there's like the technical side of it, right? Learning the fretboard, getting all that down. But then comping is just, it's a matter of making sure you're serving the soloist. Like, and that's where I say guitar players tend to overplay because you have all these cool things you can do, right? So you play too much. Don't do that, right? I'm a guitar player, so I'm not just offending the guitar players here on purpose. So just listen to what the soloist is playing and respond to that. And comping really takes a lot of practice. It's really hard to teach comping, but but knowing your instrument and then yes, listening, transcribing a little bit, things like that can help. Um, and again, there's lots of tools online to help you. Jens Larson, recording yourself, great discussion. Yes, that was an awesome discussion. And also, Jens Larson is one of the nicest guys that's ever lived. Just gonna say that. Um, Howard Garner, what tips can you give to help play freely and break away from being predictable? For me, what's worked, and this may not work for everybody, is to literally play free. Actually, Dan, we on the podcast, I did a little exercise with Dan on our episode that we did sometime last year, and that would basically be well. There's a couple ideas. So one is just literally playing free, and I don't mean like avant garde or any of that. All I mean is like no chord progressions, and just start playing whatever ideas come to your head. Okay, and that really gets your ear thinking, and you're just reacting, right? You're in a reaction mode. You're not in a thinking mode. So that's a good frame of mind to be in. And I think Kenny Werner talks about that in his book. Um, but just get into that mindset. And the second thing I would do is take a popular chord progression like a 2-5-1 and simply find as many different ways you can. So just limit yourself to four notes, quarter notes. Okay. Start with quarter notes. You can move to other subdivisions and just figure out as many different ways, different ideas with just quarter notes that you can play a 2-5-1 and connect the chords together. Okay. Again, composing. We're talking about composing here, not just regurgitating licks because then it sounds predictable. So that's one place you could start this week practicing some of those things. Um, Micah Finister, yes, the modes I think I know, but I don't know how to make a solo interesting over one chord over a longer time. Well, I think Micah making a solo interesting over one chord is hard for just about anybody because it's just I almost find it's more hard. It's harder to play good solos over one chord or like modal music, like So What, for example, or impressions, than it is to play like bebop because for me personally, it just I like there's the more harmonic information I have, the more creativity I can develop. And it's hard when you're just limited to one chord. So you're definitely not alone there. Like I said, take a mode, take a scale, take an idea, try to compose as many different ideas as you can, and you'll come up with things. You will. Luke Swinkle says, I will do the masterclass if I have time. That would be a fun experiment of composing for my channel. Okay, cool. Awesome. Happy to have you in that. That'll be awesome. TLG Production says, I find that keeping your notes relatively close together, if you just go up and down the range of the instrument, it loses tension. Going up high should be so very subjective, though. Okay, I'm not sure I completely understood it. What you were saying there. Okay, hi Brent, Rick from Glasgow, Scotland. Thank you for joining, Rick. Appreciate you. I'm a sax player, and I've been learning piano for chords and chord changes. I think all melody instrument players should learn piano to some degree. I would agree with you on that. I'm not a great piano player by any means, but taking some piano courses in college really kind of helps a little bit. Especially if you play a confusing instrument like the guitar, which doesn't completely always make sense. The piano, like everything's laid out for you very clearly, and it helps you really start to see how harmony works in a very, especially for like horn players and stuff. Yeah, like that can be very helpful to learn a little bit of piano. That's a great suggestion. Thanks for saying that. Luke says, "Hey man, you are really behind in the chat, like 5 minutes." Sorry, Luke. I'll try to catch up, buddy. um, Dan Sitch says, yes, playing free for a few minutes is part of my daily practice routine now. That's awesome, Dan. I'm glad that's helpful for you. Rudy Vasquez says, as a guitar player, do you only play guide tones when you comp on swing tunes, or do you use 3 or 4 note voicings for swing and other styles of jazz? So if you're like referring to like four on the floor, like Freddie Green stuff, like Freddie Green for the most part was only playing 2 or 3 notes at a time, and that's it. And that was his career. I don't think he ever took a solo. You know, that's all he did. Chink, chink, chink. So yeah, for those situations, you're playing more of a percussive role, so it's important to know the style and how your instrument plays into that style. And in that case, yeah, it's more about rhythm. It's more about creating that rhythmic feel. If you listen to the Count Basie, like it's so much so in the background, right? Like it's just like it's like a subtle thing, but it really makes a big difference and makes it swing hard. And I would also say, um, if guitar players and piano players are trying to comp together, that's another situation where first of all, you can definitely comp together. I like to leave it to the piano more personally. That's my personal preference as a guitar player. But if you are going to comp with the piano player is playing like meaty voicings. You play thirds and sevenths. So you play something more sparse. That's what I would say with that. Uh, Dwindle, Dwell, and Dwarf. Interesting. Interesting name. I love the modern funk stuff. Snarky Puppy. Me too. And Knower. Me too. And others. But every jazz instructor has me drop my electric bass and focus on bebop with stand up. Where should I go to learn what I like? Um, well, you don't have to do that. Like, you should just play the instrument the way you want to. If you don't want to play upright bass, then don't do that. And like, I know some electric players that just shred bebop. If you want to play bebop, where should you go to learn what you like? I don't. If you're asking like a channel or something, then I don't know about that. But learn snarky puppy stuff. That's what I would say to do. Um, learn those lines. Like learn lines from Nowhere and those bands, because then that's my suggestion for always learning anything. Howard Garner says, thanks for the advice. You're welcome, Howard. Glad to help. Uh, Olegus Oleg, do you write down slash notate licks you come up with? Um, I have done it before, but for the most part, I don't. If you're really trying to like get a good idea of some repertoire and of licks and just get some stuff down, and you want to reference it later, that could be a good idea to do. So in that case, I would do it. But I personally don't really do that so much these days. If I learn an actual lick or an idea, it's more so, if I do that, then I'm more so just doing it to like, hey, I like that idea, and then I'm trying to figure out how to make it my own, right? So then I don't write it down. But yeah, it's totally a great idea to write down stuff or write down solos. Actually, writing down, like transcribing solos, can be helpful, but for different reasons, and maybe just to reference later if you forget it, which you will forget it. You will I don't remember hardly any of the solos that I've learned. And I've learned a lot of solos, but I don't remember hardly any of them in entirety if I were to try to recall them and play them on my instrument right now. Um, because that's not and that's not really the point necessarily either. So, uh Brett DeMarco, this live chat is awesome, by the way. Glad you like it, Brett. Thanks for joining me today. You're part of what's making it awesome. Um Luke Swinkles asks, what is for me as a classical composer a nice jazzy chord to solo over and to experiment with? In my opinion, it works better to learn things one at a time in a good way than just everything together. That's true, although the way you approach one chord is gonna be a little bit different than because, like, for example, if someone says, "What scale should I play over a dominant seventh chord?" Immediately, I just ask myself, "Well, what chord is coming before it and what chord is coming after it?" Right? Does if a 2 chord comes before it, then and a 1 chord comes after, I'm gonna treat that way different, depending on what it is. Or let's say it's a dominant seventh chord, but then it's gonna resolve to a minor seventh chord, right? It's a 5-1 in a minor key. I'm gonna treat that dominant seventh chord possibly different, right? Where I might feel it differently. Um, but if you really wanna, like, go all out and just, like, work on 1 chord, try, like, just, try, like, a major 7 sharp 11 chord and just jam out on that. Um Maybe. But there's lots of stuff you can work with. Tim Delaney says, "Thanks. I've been listening to you since you started the podcast. I didn't start playing any music until I turned 60. Your podcast and training books have been helpful." I'm so happy to hear that, Tim. You're making my day. I appreciate that. That's amazing that you've been listening for like 3 years. That's awesome. Over 3 years since I did the podcast. And it's funny, like when I listened to like the first episode of my podcast, it's like it's a little I'm a little embarrassed by it. Like it sounds weird, but I think I got better at podcasting because podcasting, like playing jazz, is an art. Um, like teaching is an art. All these things, you get better at it as you go. So thanks for. I'm glad you've been following the podcast for so long. I really appreciate you. Um, okay, so that's all. It looks like that's all the questions I have for now. I really do appreciate all of you for being here, doing for over an hour. Um, so I think I have some more things to do for for work today before I head home. So thanks for everybody for being here. Hope some of this was helpful. That some of you got your questions answered. Again, uh, 1 second, I got to remove someone from the comments. Again, if you want to sign up for my Boost Your Jazz Blues free masterclass, please do that. It's You can do that at jazzbluesaccelerator.com, which is my jazz blues course. It's coming out on October 6th, and the masterclass is coming out on that date too, which is the only way to get invited into the Jazz Blues Accelerator course. But it's a great masterclass. I just finished putting it together, and I'm really, really excited about this masterclass. Like it turned out like better than I imagined it would. And I know that it's just packed full of value. So I know you're gonna get a lot out of it. Regardless if you take my full course at the end or not. The masterclass is gonna be great. So go to jazzbluesaccelerator.com, get signed up for that. Really appreciate all of you. You guys rock. You guys are super awesome. I'll see you guys sometime soon. Follow the Jazz Blues Month on the podcast. Also, I have some YouTube videos on the blues, jazz blues coming up as well. So make sure you're subscribed for all that. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.